From the Cronkite studios in downtown Phoenix, this is Cronkite News.
Today could be the last day of the impeachment trial, but it depends on how the Senate votes on allowing more witnesses.
Plus, we'll tell you how the Arizona Secretary of State wants to improve voting security.
And renewed efforts to help improve reading scores for elementary students here in Arizona.
Cronkite News starts now.
Good evening and welcome to Cronkite News on Arizona PBS. I'm Tina Giuliano.
And I'm Jose Solis. Thank you for joining us. No witnesses. That's the vote in the Senate just about an hour ago. Senators voting 51-49 against a move by Democrats to call more witnesses in the trial. Arizona Senator Martha McSally had said earlier that she would vote no, but fellow Senator Kyrsten Sinema did not tip her hand until this evening. She joined other Democrats calling for witnesses. The debate comes amid New York Times reports that a member of the White House defense team was in the room when Trump made his controversial call to Ukraine. This is according to a manuscript by former National Security Advisor John Bolton. Bolton's book also alleged Trump told him that the hold on Ukrainian military aid was directly linked to his desire for an investigation of Democratic candidate Joe Biden. Senate leaders had threatened to work through the weekend, but recessed after the witness vote and likely won't be back until next week.
With the 2020 presidential election just a few months away, the Arizona Secretary of State's office is ramping up security measures to ensure voters feel confident at the polls. Even though the state's election department says there aren't any imminent threats to voting systems, they are still encouraging voters and election officials to be prepared for the possibility of hacking and interference. Cronkite News reporter Marcela Bayeto learned what the state is doing differently.
The environment in which we conduct elections has changed a lot.
And Secretary of State Katie Hobbs's top mission to improve security measures for elections across the state. With Arizona being considered a battleground state in the upcoming presidential election, Hobbs says the issue of security is critical now more than ever.
Arizona is sort of a state that's going to be a hard-fought state on the national stage, and so we want to be prepared.
The state is focusing on three main security measures. The first involving physical security of polling equipment outlined in this election procedures manual.
It addresses things like storing and transporting and handling equipment, ballots.
The second safety concern, cybersecurity.
Since the 2016 election, all of our county election officials and our state officials have taken tremendous effort to address what really the new reality is of elections when it comes to potentially foreign interference and these cybersecurity concerns.
Whether you choose to vote at a traditional polling place or opt out for a mail-in ballot, the commission says that both of these ways are completely and equally secure, but that the biggest security concern that they're facing is stopping the spread of misinformation on social media.
We're trying to connect with voters to let them know where to go to get your official election information, what those trusted sources are.
Robert says those trusted sources include government websites and verified social media accounts. Ballot canvasser Idris Bayo comes in contact with Arizona voters every day and says he can see how they might be confused by misinformation online.
With the way that the internet is set up and everything like that, anybody could put out something believable that is a lie.
Just because you see something that has my picture on doesn't mean it came from me. Check our social media, check our website.
Secretary Hobbs also mentioned that county officials statewide participated in a monthly security call to go over any issues and provide support.
One Arizona county wants to protect the Second Amendment rights of its residents. The Yavapai County Board of Supervisors plans to vote Wednesday whether to join Mojave County in becoming a sanctuary county in support of gun rights. The resolution would ask the supervisors to defend state and federal constitutional rights. It also says the supervisors won't spend public money or use other government resources to enforce laws that unconstitutionally infringe on gun rights.
A presidential task force met for the first time today to discuss the issue of missing and murdered Indigenous women. The group was tasked with ways to address what they're calling an epidemic. The 7 federal officials made a plan to work with tribes over the next 2 years to combat the issue with a series of listening sessions. No one knows the number of missing Native Americans or how many have been killed. It's a statistic that has not been monitored in any federal database.
This is School Choice Week in Arizona, and while there's been some improvement in education funding, one education organization says there's still a ways to go. Cronkite News reporter Madison Atkinson explains how Arizona education continues to be a top issue for our state.
The Arizona Education Progress Meter was launched 4 years ago to share information about the state's education metrics. Today, the Progress Meter drives conversation about the policies and funds needed to reach the state's 2030 goals.
We should always be evolving, whether it's in teaching or whether it's in creating state policies, or there should always be evolution taking place.
Lynette Stant was awarded 2020 Teacher of the Year by the Arizona Educational Foundation. She teaches 3rd grade. That's an area of focus for the Progress Meter. Right now, only 46% of 3rd grade students read at their level or above. The 2030 goal is to have 72% of 3rd graders reading at their level or above.
So if I have a student who maybe was not reading at the 3rd grade level, came in as maybe a 1st grade reader, and we got them all the way up to 2nd grade, 8th month, that student made a lot of growth.
The Progress Meter was developed in 2016 by several education groups dedicated to student success, including Expect More Arizona.
Right now, we are not on track to meet the goals of the Arizona Education Progress Meter. While we have seen increases in every area, we are not in a trajectory which will allow us to meet the goals of the Progress Meter by 2030.
Thompson says there are programs here in Arizona and across the country that are providing results. But it really comes down to the division of resources.
At the end of the day, we need to invest resources in all of education, early education, that's pre-kindergarten, all the way through college and career education investments, and K-12 in the middle, in order to ensure that we have the capacity to support that innovation at every level.
Stant says she works every day to support that mission.
But if you look around my room, you can see I address the standards all the time, and that holds me accountable to the student learning. So when we think of that Arizona Progress Meter, I mean, the intention of it is really good. It's about accountability and ensuring that all, Arizona students, we want to ensure that there's growth and success across the board.
Governor Doug Ducey proposed spending $608 million for K-12 public education in his new budget. Live in the broadcast center, Madison Atkinson, Cronkite News.
We have a beautiful weekend ahead of us, but maybe even a cooler week.
That sounds like music to my ears.
Same.
And for more, Annabella Piunti is in the Cronkite Weather Center tracking the latest.
It is currently 71 degrees and sunny in Phoenix. But looking into your evening, you could see that it is going to be pretty mild on your commute home with 69 degrees at 6 o'clock p.m. But moving forward into the evening, the temperatures are going to start dropping with 57 degrees at 10 o'clock p.m. So if you are going out tonight, make sure to grab a jacket. For those of you going to the Phoenix Open tomorrow, as you can see, it is only going to be 47 degrees at 7 o'clock a.m. But don't you worry, because moving into the afternoon, things are going to start warming up with 74 degrees at 3 o'clock p.m. For your state highs tomorrow, you could see up in Flagstaff, it is going to be 54 degrees as a high and 62 degrees in Payson. But don't you worry, because moving further south into this state, we're going to start getting a high of 77 degrees in Phoenix and 75 in Tucson. I have your 8-day forecast here, and as you can see this weekend, it is going to be spectacular with 78 degrees on your Super Bowl Sunday. But you might as well enjoy this weekend, because moving further into the week, the temperatures are going to start dropping with only a high of 58 degrees on Wednesday. But it looks like moving into next weekend, things are going to start heating up for you guys. For Cronkite News Weather Center, I'm Annabella Piunti.
A new bill could help provide shelter for senior citizens who are facing homelessness. If passed, SB 1283 would grant $5 million to a single nonprofit shelter for beds to be used by people who are at least 55 years old. The Senate Appropriations Committee will hear the bill for the first time next week. Central Arizona Services told Cronkite News it helped more than 1,300 people who are older than 55 who were experiencing homelessness in 2019 fiscal year. When we come back, we take a look at the top stories from the week,
including the latest on the North American trade deal, see how the new deal between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico could impact us here in Arizona.
And we'll take a look at the late Kobe Bryant's impact on women's basketball here in the Valley.
With wildfires, a scarcity of water, and other environmental issues facing the Earth today, it's critical to stay up to date with local impacts of a changing climate. That's why we created Elemental, covering sustainability, a multimedia collaboration between public television and radio stations. From climate change to water conservation to renewable energy and much more, Elemental covers the latest in sustainability news. Find our stories on our website, elementalreports.com.
By the year 2050, there will be more plastic in the ocean than fish. Before Professor Halden, I had an insane amount of passion, but I almost felt helpless because I didn't know how to use it. Professor Halden gave me a chance to make a difference. Being at a place like ASU allows you to take these big leaps. Ultimately, the biggest problems in the world cannot be solved alone.
Welcome to another edition of Cronkite Sports Now. I'm Taylor Rocha. Let's talk sports.
For the latest on local sports and beyond, we've got you covered.
Let's do this thing.
We challenge reporters to go beyond, a game story. We want stories with depth.
It's just a crucial step from the college experience into the professional experience while you're still in school.
At Cronkite Sports Now, watch the journalists of tomorrow cover sports today.
Tonight, we begin with an in-depth look at an issue that's been gaining attention both nationally and here in Arizona, maternal mortality. The death of a woman during pregnancy, at delivery, or soon after.
A new state advisory committee is studying these deaths and working to identify ways to prevent them. On the Navajo Nation, one program is giving Native women the tools to help.
Cronkite News reporter Jennifer Alvarez traveled to Window Rock to learn more about this unique effort.
According to the CDC, women in the U.S. are more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes than anywhere else in the developed world. Native American women face some of the highest rates of maternal death, and right here in Arizona, those disparities are even more profound. So I traveled to the heart of the Navajo Nation and spoke with women there, hoping to combat these numbers by rekindling Native knowledge and teaching traditional practices to promote health.
It's building a revolution for us. And I think we're taking back and reclaiming our knowledge.
Okay, sweep your teepee, sweep your teepee.
Sweeping hands and happy smiles.
Make fire!
Fill the land on the Navajo Nation. These Native women are finishing up a day of training with a traditional game. They've been learning how to be doulas, or people trained to support women through pregnancy and birth.
Basically, they're helpers. And I always compare it to how we help each other in ceremonies. That's how we should help each other during birth and pregnancy and parenting.
Melissa Brown knows just how important these helpers can be.
My first birth that I had when I was a teenage mother was very traumatic. I didn't understand how my body worked. I didn't understand how labor and delivery worked. I was very scared. I didn't have very much support. And so when I got pregnant with my second daughter, when I had an Indigenous midwife, it made all the difference. I had an unmedicated, beautiful birth. It completely changed my life.
It's the first time this kind of training has happened here, and it's important that it does.
We're a desert for everything: food, reproductive health care, maternity care.
Local experts agree access to prenatal care here is limited.
The hospital isn't just around the corner, just around the block. A lot of our care takes probably an hour or so just to get to healthcare facilities.
The maternal mortality rate has increased substantially in the U.S. over the past years, and Native women are among those hit the hardest.
Something needs to change, not only, here, but in other Indigenous communities. And what happens in a lot of communities is we're bringing in non-Indigenous people who don't have that lived experience and delivering health education in a way that doesn't make sense to a lot of people in the community.
So Brown teamed up with Nicole Gonzalez, founder of the Changing Woman Initiative, to teach women how to use traditional practices to improve maternal health.
We are our own experts in our community. We can help ourselves. We can empower ourselves. We can educate ourselves. That's something that we really advocate for, is that education, that culturally relevant education, acknowledging all of those things that affect our health in our communities that are very different from someone who lived in the city that had access to a variety of services.
The Changing Women Initiative held its Indigenous doula training inside this hogan, which the women say was representative of a mother's womb. We weren't able to film inside during the workshop because they wanted to maintain a safe space for Indigenous women.
This is like the work of our ancestors and our grandmothers and our aunties. This is all a result of all of those Indigenous women and people that have carried this work over generations for, us and then the next generations.
Together, they hope to help Native women cope with trauma and loss.
We might hear from our elders that we're not supposed to talk about death, or that we have some taboos about being around places where people have died. In our Dene culture, that's one of our teachings. And so to have a really frank conversation about death and miscarriage and abortion and pregnancy was really the heart of the issue I think a lot of people wanted to know about.
It's so much more than just the doula training and learning about birth. It's learning about ourselves, connecting with our own healing, and there's a lot of healing that happens in this training.
A lot of that healing especially happened during these moments.
Seeing everybody laugh and enjoy themselves and be in their traditional dress. I wish the world would see Native women like that we're not sick, we're not dying, we're not vulnerable, we're not our disease, we're not our social structure that's making us feel like we have to feel ashamed for having a baby at 20 or 15, but that we're out there playing and having a good time and laughing, and for me, that's our true self.
Brown has brought her training to Native women across the country and in Canada. There were 40 participants at the workshop in Window Rock, and the women I talked to said they were ready to take back what they've learned and share it with women in their own communities. Live in the studio, Jennifer Alvarez, Cronkite News.
And while the impeachment trial carries on, President Trump did manage to score a big agenda item by signing the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement today. This new trade deal effectively replaces NAFTA. And as Cronkite News reporter Frankie McClister reports, reactions across Arizona are rolling in.
This trade deal has been heavily pushed by Arizona's business and political leaders, highlighting that our relationship with our neighbors, and particularly with Mexico, is critical to maintaining and growing the state's economy. With the stroke of a pen, President Donald Trump signed the US-Mexico-Canada agreement, also known as the USMCA, in Washington today.
Basically a political win for both Democrats and Republicans. Both parties can claim victory. Obviously, renegotiating NAFTA was one of the Trump administration's kind of primary policy goals. And by the same token, Democrats have wanted an update to NAFTA for many years.
Politics aside, this new deal will impact Arizona in many different ways. Yuma Mayor Doug Nichols was at the White House today for the signing.
We do, as a state, over $20 billion worth of trade just with Mexico alone. So it doesn't even count the investments and business we do with Canada. And so having a strong trade agreement that is modern, that keeps up with everything from modern wage structures to intellectual property are essential for us to grow that $20 billion.
In addition to Nichols, Mesa Mayor John Giles and Arizona Chamber of Commerce President and CEO Glenn Hammer were also at the signing. Republican Senator Martha McSally also on hand, tweeting, "Ready to join POTUS at the USMCA signing. What a great day for Arizona." Arizona's other senator, Democrat Kyrsten Sinema, sending a statement to Cronkite News reading in part, quote, "Cross-border trade means more Arizona jobs, a stronger economy, and greater opportunity for Arizona families. I'm proud to have worked with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to advance the United States-Mexico-Canada trade agreement, and I'm glad this critical agreement was approved with bipartisan support. Signing the USMCA is a campaign promise made by President Donald Trump. This new deal updates trade rules for the digital age, boosts domestic car production, and makes it harder for Mexico to undercut American workers with cheap labor." Julie Murphy is the outreach director for the Arizona Farm Bureau and says that this deal will bring new economic opportunities for the state of Arizona.
No, it shouldn't have any. It's only going to be positive for not only our farmers and ranchers, but it's also going to be positive for you and I.
And this new trade deal also includes what is known as a sunset clause. After 6 years, it requires the three countries to review whether to remain in agreement. If any country decides not to continue with the pact, the USMCA will expire 16 years later. In the studio, Frankie McLister, Cronkite News.
Native Americans face the highest rates of diabetes in the nation, with statistics showing that more than 15% have been diagnosed with the disease. Cronkite News reporter Jordan Elder found out how one Phoenix organization is working to change that.
Native Health wants to teach adults how to deal with diabetes, and you won't need a pencil for this class, but you do need to bring your appetite.
Has anyone used the apple slicer before? Might take a little bit of practice.
I know a lot of people in the Native American community and in the Phoenix community, they get diagnosed with diabetes, but aren't necessarily educated on it.
But this class is getting educated, and it's not your typical lecture hall.
You could always try smoothies.
Having this class, it helps them become educated, find out what diabetes is, what kind of foods they can eat with diabetes, what can help them for their overall health.
This free 20-week course is open to anyone. Smith demonstrates a healthy, simple, and cost-effective meal. And best of all, it's diabetes-friendly.
Thank you.
Today, the group made this healthy chicken Waldorf salad. And as they leave, everyone gets their own to-go bag full of ingredients so that they can make this salad at home by themselves.
Being diabetic is very expensive. And so this is a plus that they give us and very helpful that we get what we need to make our dinners tonight.
Diabetics have to be careful with what they eat in order to maintain their blood sugar levels. Usually this means eating more fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. These are much more expensive than chips, which used to be Glorine Barton's favorite snack.
It would be very helpful to a lot of people that are going through this to come here. It would really, because a lot of people don't know how to deal with their diabetes.
Living with diabetes may not be easy, but the Food for Thought program is showing people that it's possible.
Oh, it's delicious.
And it can taste good. Native Health also offers transportation to these classes to make them more accessible, and there's always a dietitian on hand to answer questions. Live in the Broadcast Center, Jordan Elder, Cronkite News.
The sports world continues to mourn the loss of one of the greatest basketball players to ever set foot on a court, Kobe Bryant. Rob Werner has more on the impact the Laker great had on the women's game.
Kobe Bryant was absolutely outspoken in his support of women's basketball and the stage he thought it deserved. Yesterday, members of the women's basketball community, including ASU players and Sun Devils head coach Charlie Turner-Thorne, shared their thoughts on what Bryant meant to the women's game.
It's interesting when really, really powerful people or really, really successful people or really, really talented people have daughters. You know, because a lot of times, clearly, you know, sports is dominated by men, you know, and you know, we are obviously very grateful for all the coverage that we get and, you know, the things that we have, but it's no work in comparison. So when somebody like that, you know, recognizes and has an appreciation for the women's game, it's amazing.
He was just a big impact to not only basketball, but just the world in general. And a lot of kids looked up to him growing up. I know I played basketball and I looked up to him when I was younger. I mean, I bought his shoes maybe every 2 weeks. I bought a new pair of his shoes and I just loved him.
I had just shown an interview of Kobe Bryant, a short interview to my team last week, going into last week's game. It was an awesome interview about how he talked. He was asked, are you more fear of failure or will to win? And he said, I'm neither. He said, I don't. Either one of those is not going to help you, perform. I'm about just figuring things out. I'm about being in the moment.
Less than a year ago in May, the Laker legend brought his 13-year-old daughter Gianna's AAU team to visit the Phoenix Mercury. The WNBA community continues to grieve the loss of the icon and his daughter Gigi.
Oh, really? He didn't fake anything. He wasn't one to say things that he didn't mean. He wasn't one to do things that he didn't believe in. And he had a different perspective.
At 41, he had so much life to live. He was just starting his life in a lot of ways. We know him as the basketball player, absolutely, but I think even that small amount of time where he was retired, you could see he had a lot to give.
Bryant played for the Lakers for 20 seasons, with the superstar constantly showing support to women's players in college, like Oregon's Sabrina Ionescu, and professionals such as the Mercury's Diana Taurasi. Just last week, Bryant said several WNBA players, including Taurasi, could play in the NBA today. And while he is now gone, his actions will continue to inspire players for many more years to come. In the Broadcast Center, Rob Warner, Cronkite News.
On the next Arizona Horizon is the Journalists Roundtable. We'll discuss the impact of Arizona's 2 U.S. senators at the impeachment trial of President Trump, and a federal court shoots down Arizona's ballot harvesting law.
I'm Judy Woodruff. Tonight on the NewsHour, senators continue to put the prosecution and defense to the test, while the greater question of witnesses on impeachment looms. Coming up after Cronkite News and Arizona Horizon.
Join us each week on Catalyst, the show that explores new advancements, technologies, and innovations at Arizona State University that are shaping the future for tomorrow and beyond. Catalyst, Wednesdays at 9, right here on Arizona PBS.